You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise, and federally certified veteran-owned small business. I'm your host, Robert Bain, along with our producer, Chris Spangle. Our podcast is featured on the All Indiana Podcast Network in partnership with Wish TV. You may find Leaders and Legends at allindianapodcastnetwork.com. Thinking of starting a podcast or need to host a public meeting? Let Leaders and Legends, LLC be your partner as you look for new ways to communicate your message. Please contact us at chris@leadersandlegends.net. As always, all our podcast interviews are dedicated to the legacy and generosity of P.E. McAllister. Our guest today, executive editor. Not breaking news, not something else. Executive editor of the Indianapolis Star. Name is Ryan Martin. He has held several roles inside the newsroom, including breaking news editor, public safety reporter. That's a glorious gig. Is there like a Vic Reichert commemorative desk?
If not, there should be.
He's also an investigative reporter. Ryan was part of a team of journalists from 4 newsrooms. Were awarded the 2021 Pulitzer? Or is that how we say it?
Depends who you ask. I say Pulitzer.
A man of the people. Won the 2021 Pulitzer Prize for national reporting for an investigation that examined canine units and the damage inflicted by police dogs. Ryan also co-authored a series that exposed a death crisis inside Indiana's county jails and an investigation examining how lax oversight from state regulators fueled violence inside Indianapolis bars and clubs. The Indiana chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists has honored his journalism as Story of the Year 3 times. That's all accurate, what I read, right?
Sure is.
Came from the Indy Star website, so I've been chasing Mr. Martin for a while. He is very gracious to come on the podcast. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. While you did chase me for a minute, it was largely a matter of timing with this fancy new job of mine. And I just want to say I appreciate the invitation. I'm happy to be here.
Well, thank you so much. Now, I don't drink alcohol, but we can do a drinking game based on Seinfeld references, if you'd like. Maybe Briggs and some of your other people can get together and drink. So this will be a podcast about nothing featuring Ryan Martin.
Perfect. I should have brought in some whiskey and we could have at least stared at the bottle. It's only 10 a.m., so maybe I wouldn't be drinking either.
Well, you live on the east side. 10 a.m. is kind of late.
Yeah, that's right. And I was at the Snug. I'm sure we'll talk about Irvington a lot because you and I always do. But I was at the Snug yesterday for their anniversary party. It's a whiskey bar in Irvington that opened a couple years ago. And I got some new supply from my favorite local bar.
Well, let's not bury the lead. How great is Irvington?
I lucked into living in Irvington, to be honest with you. When my wife, we weren't married yet, but when my wife and I moved to Indianapolis in 2015, we were living in another place where we lucked into. We were living along Virginia Avenue in Fletcher Place, which was perfect for a couple of young people moving to the city, walking around restaurants, music festivals, everything else. And then when we wanted to buy, we soon realized we could not afford to live in to buy a home in the Fountain Square, Fletcher Place area. So we found ourselves looking, and Irvington fit everything we could possibly want. Our neighbors are amazing. We have a small yard for our dog. We can walk to places like the Snug or Giacomo. There's always cool festivals and things happening. Truly made Indianapolis become home for both of us. We did live here for work, and then it became home.
What's your favorite Irvington tradition?
I probably have too many for the podcast because Irvington is proud of its history and proud of its traditions. Of course, not all of it is good history, as we all know, but I really enjoy the witch cackling contest at the Halloween festival. There's just something that, I don't know, I can't miss it. I have to be there.
Is it, Irvington has changed obviously from when I grew up there in the 70s and 80s. There's a lot of complaints that Irvington is slipping a bit in terms of crime, public safety, that sort of thing. It's become a little bit of a destination. We obviously had the very tragic shooting just as we record this just about a week ago. And then I read that Irvington's going to be part of some cultural district or walking around drunk program. What the hell? Of course, it's been involved. Irvington's been a walking around drinking site forever. Are you a little worried about where it's headed?
I'm not worried whatsoever. There was that tragic shooting, of course, and I was heartened to see so many of my neighbors and the business community within Irvington standing together to show such kindness and resilience amid tragedy. For me, I think that really speaks to why I love Irvington so much. It gets a bad rap sometimes from people because of the very, how should I say, divided Facebook group that exists. That I feel like most of the city is in that Facebook group, even if they themselves aren't part of Irvington. But even amid all the back and forth about things like the Blue Line or the outdoor drinking destination or district that you mentioned, or there were traffic barriers that were a topic of discussion for a long time. Whenever there's something big and important, and in this case tragic, the community always stands together on behalf of the neighborhood. And to me, that's what community is. That's why you want to be a part of a community. If someone doesn't have an opinion, if somebody doesn't stand together, then you may as well just live out in the woods by yourself.
We're almost up on, maybe by the time this podcast is posted, which should be December 15th, we're up on Luminaria time. Do you participate? That was always my favorite Irvington tradition.
I don't want to speak for her, but that might be my wife's favorite. She is the one who always makes sure that our home participates in that. And I'm also a fan of that. It's cool to look down the street and see all the candles.
Well, and I hate to mention this, but I only will do so because it was posted on social media, but you have a new couple in Irvington, journalists, Miss Kayla Dwyer and her husband, Peter Blanchard. Did you help them kind of decide where to move? Like, this place is great. You should look at this place.
So I'm friends with both of them. Quick backstory. When Kayla moved to Indianapolis, she sat next to me at the Star when I was working at the Star the first time around, and we became friends. And then as soon as I met Peter, became close to him too. And of course, he and I worked together at Mirror Indy, and we sat next to each other there. So you kind of become friends with the journalists you sit next to. But in this case, I was fortunate to become close to both of them. And I got to tell you, I don't think I bothered anyone more than those two about buying a house in Irvington. You guys need to stay here, settle down here. Let's go.
They were living in a house. I won't give the address, but they were living in a house where I used to play basketball when I was a kid.
Oh,
their previous place, and I was happy to see that they moved. Last question involving Irvington. Blue Line, you mentioned it a minute ago. I was going to bring it up. I did some work, full disclosure, for Indigo, not necessarily on the Blue Line, but on some other issues. There was some controversy about what it would mean, what it will mean. What's your take? And I defended Aaron Freeman, Senator Freeman, who's was one of the biggest opponents of it, thought he made some good points. In the end, the argument kind of was, we're never going to get this money again, so we got to take it. That was my argument, which isn't very philosophical. But for you, are you allowed to kind of have an opinion on that, given your new role at the Star as executive editor?
So to the extent that I ever have an opinion that affects my work, that affects like how I operate as a journalist, it tends to be in favor of, or it always is in favor of people having a voice in how their government operates. I will always have a bias toward that. And what I mean by that is I'm always trying to think about who has power, who has influence, and how are they using that power and influence? And is it with the community in mind, with their constituents in mind, with my readers in mind, or is it for their own interests in some way? So on the Blue Line, when it came to a lot of the news coverage and kind of what I was talking to reporters about, I always wanted to make sure that Irvington business leaders had a voice, that the residents had a voice, that people across the city on the west side who weren't really a part of the conversation necessarily, to make sure they had a voice in the debate. Sometimes through I don't think it's necessarily intentional or anything, but sometimes journalists can get stuck in a committee hearing, can get stuck in the state house or in the city county building, and then the only voices they're hearing are the ones of people who have other priorities. Maybe they're talking about something like the blue line, but they have other priorities. Now, I'm not saying that's the case with anyone involved in this debate at all. I don't think that. But so yeah, my opinion was give people a seat at the table so they could say what they needed to say, because after all, it is their community. And I guess I should also have full disclosure. A blue line stop would be in front of my house at a currently, in my estimation, a dangerous intersection. So it would benefit me in that way.
You mentioned, well, we've talked about Irvington. So that's Spangle isn't at the end of the podcast. You have been listening to Leaders and Legends. You mentioned journalism. I want to talk about that, obviously, and get to your role, get to the star. But do you think the definition of journalism has changed in the past, let's say, 50 years?
That's a really good question. I don't exactly know how to answer it because I think for me it's changed in my experience, which could be a reflection of the changing times, or it could just be a reflection of you get a little more humble the older you get and you've made a few mistakes yourself. So you start to understand why things are the way they are. What I've seen happen is intense pressure from social media on the business of journalism and on the journalism itself. And that factors into basically every single decision that's made inside a newsroom now, to some extent, whether people know it or not.
It's still called Chartbeat?
Chartbeat, as far as I know, still exists. We use something different, but yeah.
Same. And how much does it influence decisions on what to write?
It does have an influence because those are tools that we have access to that gives us a window into what people are reading, what people are consuming. And no one wants to write a story that no one reads, because what's the point? That doesn't mean it's the only factor. The listeners of this podcast may or may not know, for example, that the Star has had an investigative unit for years now. And
I've been a victim.
Thank you for your service. I was a member of the unit for a while. A lot of the nice things you said about me at the beginning were from my time on that unit. And that's a real example of how we specifically want to make sure that we have reporters who aren't only responding to metrics when it comes to reporting. Much of what we do inside the newsroom is focused on public service. That doesn't mean it's all, highfalutin public service all the time, although there's plenty of that too. We get a lot of people who come to our website to figure out what streaming service the Colts game is on.
Yeah.
And that is service. You could watch it on a number of different channels and services, so we want to make sure people know. We have a lot of people come to us for weather. Anytime there's any sort of weather event. These are just examples of things that aren't necessary. It's just how people live their lives. They want to know these things, and we want to be the service provider for that too.
We talked about social media, and it's interesting because it's almost sort of like a Pavlovian criticism of the media. Oh, they just did it for clicks. Well, clicks help pay the bills. Is that you mentioned just a few minutes ago, but just specifically to that, are there examples where you're thinking, if we wrote this story, if we had this headline, we get 20% more clicks. Is that a tough decision to make sometimes?
No, not for me. It isn't. No, there are times, we post, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but an awful lot of articles every single day. And I'd be lying if I said on occasion, I don't see a headline that makes me wince a little bit. That's bound to happen. And anytime I get any sort of criticism about a headline, one of the things I try to tell people is, of all the articles that posted today, all the articles that posted this month, you had one concern. That's a pretty good batting average for us. What we are trying to do every single day is make local news available for people, make it relevant to their lives, and that's the number one goal. And when it comes to anything that has to do with potential criticism of a public official or anything that's investigative, anything that's any sort of accountability journalism, for example, we are always working with fairness in mind at the front. We, of course, are incentivized to think of fairness, because if we mess that part up, then the whole article would crumble. And so when you see a headline, you should know that it is the result of a lot of research, a lot of reporting, a lot of interviewing, a lot of rigor, and several layers of editing. And we could, of course, goose those up to make them more clickable, so to speak, but that wouldn't necessarily always be true or accurate, so we don't do that.
So no headless body found in topless bar headline is in the Star's future?
No, I don't think so. We'll see.
The greatest headline of all time? New York Post, I think, was that one. To go back, because I want to talk obviously more about Indianapolis. But most of us, maybe not all of us, but a chunk of us know what we want to do when we're younger. Something has tickled our fancy, probably in grade school or junior high, and this is somehow, some way what you want to do with the rest of your life. And, it's usually not a straight path, of course, a little bit yellow brick roadish. I always wanted to be involved in politics, and I've been fortunate enough to do that. When did you catch the journalism bug?
It wasn't necessarily a straight line for me. I was listening to your interview with IMPD Chief Chris Bailey, who I've talked to as part of my job for years and years and years.
Great IPS kid.
Yeah, I enjoyed all the talk about IPS. And
I only have 3 or 4 subjects I really want to talk about.
And I was sort of chuckling because I believe you two talked about when did he know he wanted to be a cop? Because for the longest time, I thought I wanted to be a police officer when I was a kid. And in high school, as part of my education, I'm not an IPS kid. I grew up out in the country in Southern Illinois. As part of my education in high school, I job shadowed a local police department a few times. And it's not particularly exciting out in the country, but I thought that's what I was going to do. And then at some point, my maybe senior year of high school, I'd been doing like yearbook and I had been writing, creative writing and stuff like that. My English teacher pulled me aside and told me, hey, you should really think about journalism as a career. And at the time, I didn't even really know what that meant. We got the Southern Illinoisan delivered to our house every day, and I would read about my baseball team, and my family was always very involved in local politics and state politics in Illinois. So they would want to read those stories, and I would hear them talk about it.
St. Louis Cardinals fan?
Oh, absolutely. Big time.
But you went to college in Missouri.
Correct.
Is that correct?
And even then, it took me a minute to get there because I initially went to community college and didn't yet know I wanted to do journalism when I went to community college. But I started working at the school paper and got hooked. There's a thrill to it when you have a story or an interview that really stands out to you. And I can still remember calling my aunt and uncle, my mom, being just so excited about getting to interview a basketball player on this JUCO team in the locker room. I mean, it is something that is infectious when you get to be a part of that sort of thing. And so I got hooked and decided to go to the University of Missouri, which has a fantastic journalism school, for my bachelor's degree.
You're well known among many of us for being very even-keeled. It's the last time you screamed or yelled and not at sports? I'm sure you can hear Briggs screaming about the Lions from the front porch of your house. What upsets you?
I try not to scream or yell. I don't think it's very helpful. I can't think of the last time I've done it for work or personal reasons. I guess I've shouted at my dog for peeing inside, but even then he gets so dang sad that I know if I yell at him, I just feel bad. So I don't even really yell at him either.
The first time you came...
Sorry,
go ahead.
For the record, so his name isn't slandered. It's very, very rare where he pees inside. He's a very good dog.
Scared of you because of your silent assassin look that I'm sure. What about the Indy Star brought you here the first time? Is it 2015?
Correct.
So did you come here during RIFRA?
I'd have to remember the
It'd be
exact
after
timeline.
because RIFRA, I think, was 2015. No, it was 2015. I only know because I was working for Mike Pence during RIFRA.
For 2 years prior to my time at the Star, I was working for the daily newspaper in Elkhart, Indiana, which has the best name,
The Truth?
the Elkhart Truth. I was started as the digital director up there and became the managing editor. And so a lot of what was happening in Indianapolis around RIFRA, I can't recall if it was while I was at the Star or while I was at the Truth, but either way, I was following it because it was the biggest news.
You're listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies. Our guest today is Ryan Martin. He is the executive editor of the Indy Star. Are you the Indy Star now or the Indianapolis Star?
We'll take either.
Are you the youngest executive editor?
Well,
you got to be close.
I haven't looked into that, so I don't know, but maybe.
As you grow old, you get used to not being the youngest member or person who's ever done anything, that's for sure. But you have a lot of younger journalists working for you and with you. How weird is it, if maybe not at all, or fun, is it to go from mentee to mentor?
That's a good question because in many ways, I have been both the whole time I've been in my career. I think of, when it comes to me being a mentee, I think of people like longtime investigative reporter Tim Evans, and longtime investigative reporter Marissa Kwiatkowski, Tony Cook, who still is an investigative reporter at the Star. I mean, I've learned so much from these journalists over the years and still continue to do so. Tim recently retired. Marissa's now working for the Knight Foundation. But I still think of the things they've taught me. You've probably had experiences with all three of them, I would guess, since they've worked in the Indianapolis newsroom for so many years. But
I may be the only Republican who likes Tony Cook.
Oh, that's not true. I mean, it's maybe true you like him, but that's not true you're the only Republican.
I've worked with Tony several times. Have never had a bad experience, but, I can understand how his work can get people fired up.
That may be true.
And he still calls me, even though I've literally have never procured an interview for him for any of my clients.
I think that speaks to his character, though. He is someone who does not make assumptions about anyone or anything. There's a joke that I was taught early in my career that if your mother says she loves you, you need to fact check it, or you need to get a second source. Tony's the kind of reporter that reports that way, works that way. And so I've learned a lot from him and others. And by the same token, I've always considered it my responsibility to also teach others, give back to others, to people who want it. Not all journalists that I've experienced are interested in that, but many are. So I even go talk to college classrooms, do guest lectures. I've helped with portfolio reviews. I've often been assigned people to sort of be a mentor to inside the newsroom over the years. And now I'm in this new role where things have changed, certainly, but what's different about a newsroom than certainly other places I've worked before I got into my career is it's a pretty flat organization. At the end of the day, the real boss any given day is the story itself. And all of us want to see that story succeed. We want to see the interviews. We want to see the sourcing. We want to see, a good headline to our conversation earlier. And it doesn't really matter if it's my idea, a reporter's idea, one of the other editors' idea. Like, we all sort of start to fall in line when the best option presents itself. And to the extent that there's disagreement, it's usually not top down. It's just we come to the resolution because that's what's best for the story.
One big change for you in the past 10 years or so. And I know it's been, maybe it isn't now, but say for a while, excuse me, say a difficult issue within the Star, and that is you used to be part of the union,
Mm-hmm.
an enthusiastic member of the union, as I recall. Now you're the executive editor. How is that relationship going? Because it affects us all. And is it like, man, I was a righteous young kid and now I'm wearing a tie? How the hell did that happen?
Well, depends who you'd ask. I might still be considered righteous. Tie or no tie. Yeah, it has changed, but I have a very good relationship with the leaders of the union. I hope they know they can trust me. I trust them. And it is true that I probably posted some stuff on social media that I'm not particularly proud of, but who among us hasn't? Some of that has
Spangle,
to
Rob Kendall. Let's see, who else? What other group? You're lucky you don't have your fellow East Sider Bobby King in charge of the union anymore. That'd be fun.
Yeah, I should have ticked his name off earlier. When I became a union leader, I learned a lot from him as well. And it's a different company now than it was back then too. It's just I wasn't present for the last round of negotiations that occurred with the union, but having known so many people who were involved, a lot of people were very happy with the outcome. So it's a great place to work and people are happy. And I'm sure there'll be something that pops up that we'll have to discuss at some point. But at the end of the day, the people who are involved with the union, who are involved with the newsroom, people who sit in my seat, we all want what's best for the Star as an institution. There's no disagreement about that. There may be disagreement about how to get there, but just like I was talking about with the story.
Well, is it different in some regards? You're a reporter, you're a member of the union, and your part of your negotiation is, well, we obviously didn't get into journalism for the money. We just want what's fair. And now that you're executive editor, do you get to look at the union people and go, look, you obviously didn't get into journalism for the money. So what we're giving you is fair.
Yeah. So what's the question in that?
How fun is it?
Oh,
How dangerous is it? How taxing is it when you go home at night? You're like, man, if a member of the executive editor had told me that when I was running the union, son of a bitch, I'd be so damn mad. How dare he?
nah, nothing flusters me too much. You know that. Yeah, it's part of the job. It's part of the job for me. It's part of the job for them. And ultimately, we're just trying to work towards what's best for the Star. I feel very fortunate to have had that experience. I think it informs a lot about how I operate now as the executive editor. I think part of the reason, I'm in week 10 or 11. I mean, let's not get ahead of ourselves here, but part of the reason I feel like I can do this job well is because of those experiences. I understand where people are coming from because I was there too. And anyone who is in a position of leadership, if you have that experience, if you have that empathy, it can go a long way in understanding and in communicating.
You mentioned experiences. Let's talk about one in particular, because I'm going to make an assertion and you just tell me I'm wrong. Because my last journalism class was 32 years ago. There is no better way to get indoctrinated into journalism, big time or small, however you define it, than working the public safety beat in a large urban environment.
I would say true.
And how did that shape your opinions and work and future as a reporter?
I think about my time as a public safety reporter at the Star and as my time as just a local news reporter in a St. Louis suburb. I think about it all the time because you spend so much time navigating thorny issues that very quickly can start to seem routine if you're reporting it all the time. But each incident that involves some sort of crime profoundly affects a person. It's one of the biggest things that's ever going to happen to their lives, if not the biggest. And you can't lose sight of that. You can't let the routine become routine. So I think about that all of the time. One of the Some of my biggest regrets as a journalist are tied to decisions I made on that beat. There was a time where, for years, newsrooms would write stories about weird crime that occurred.
Weird how?
Well, it's stuff like the headline you were talking about earlier, dog bites man isn't a headline, but man bites dog is, So if you had just a odd crime that occurred, not necessarily something violent, you would want to write about it because it'd be funny, it'd be weird, it'd be interesting. But with all of the knowledge we have now about undiagnosed mental health issues, it gets to be a point where I look back on some of that reporting and there's a lot of more innocent explanations for what happened, especially for stories where there wasn't really a victim. It was like a behavioral health issue happening publicly. And if I wish I could just go and delete all that I wish it had never happened. Like I'm not proud of some of that reporting. I don't think anyone was actually harmed, except it probably reinforced some unhelpful stereotypes publicly.
Well, some of when you say there wasn't necessarily a victim, is it, I live in Fountain Square. So when the homeless camp or whatever the hell you want to call it was over there was a victim. And it wasn't necessarily the people. It was the woman who was trying to sell her house. She may not be a very sympathetic victim to the news media because she's trying to sell her $600,000 house. But isn't she a victim nonetheless? I the hell wouldn't want to go see a house when 50 people were living in tents, walking around doing who knows what across the street. I mean, she did suffer.
I think what you're talking about is a different issue than what I'm talking about. That's not necessarily like an odd crime headline, where, one famous example is one moment that went viral that I wrote about. A young man broke into someone's house as they were sleeping, and she defended herself by grabbing a samurai sword that she had. I can't remember if she was collecting numbers on the wall, something like that. And she defended herself with it. The guy didn't attack her or anything. He was just having an episode, is what it seems. And then police arrived and everything was fine. And I wrote about it and put his face, posted his mugshot, wrote his name, put his age. And there's just a whole different approach to public safety reporting now where you want to focus on what's of the public's interest, not necessarily what's going to get clicks. So we make a lot of decisions now around that, or we have a lot of conversations now about how much we report that kind of information on the internet, which is forever and reaches across the globe.
Do you think it's part of journalism or the Star's responsibility to help catch the assailant, whoever he or she may be, by describing them in a certain way or giving all the information that's possible?
I think when we have those conversations, we need sufficient information to where it could actually be helpful. And that's often not the case.
You won the Pulitzer in 2021. National reporting, K-9 units and damage inflicted by police dogs.
Mm-hmm.
I hated almost every word you wrote, but doesn't mean that you weren't right because I'm so blue over here and pro-police. When you look back on that, first, what's your reaction when you get the call? It's Pulitzer's the rock, paper, and scissors of, I assume, of most journalists. Like, man, I'd love to have something so important that it gets considered. Then you win. Who told you received the Pulitzer, and what was that like? Were you thinking back into your high school days?
Well, we should come back to how much you hated every word of it, but I'll answer your question first. It's funny, I was eating lunch with James Briggs that day in the mall food court, not very glamorous. Of course, the mall's undergoing some changes.
It's less glamorous now.
But right now, our newsroom is attached to the mall. That's, of course, changing. But so we were down there at the food court eating, and every year I just always have the Pulitzers up on my phone, just kind of see who's winning. And I like to go and then read the stuff that I missed. And we were walking back to the newsroom and just outside on Georgia Street, and I had it up. And then our story popped up as a finalist. And he heard it too, and we both just sort of stopped and stared at each other like, what the hell? And then, it's going very quickly. Then they say we won. I couldn't speak. It really shocked me. I was literally speechless. Probably the only time in my life because that was so unexpected.
And so had you walked back into the newsroom at this point?
No, I was at this point. I was on Meridian Street, just off of Georgia Street.
Kilroy's.
And then he was like, I don't remember what he said. And then I'm like, I think I need to call Gwen, my wife.
Your wife,
and he's like, yeah, you need to call a few people. And so then I just went over to on Georgia Street and started making calls. And one of the funniest moments of that was I can get emotional. I started crying. And so then I, of course, tweeted, if you see someone on Georgia Street crying, it's just me. And the Pulitzer Prize's Twitter account retweeted me. I thought that was pretty fun.
Who else received the honor along with you?
So this was a real team effort that took a lot of time and a lot of resources in 4 different newsrooms. We were collaborating with AL.com in Alabama, with the Marshall Project, which is a nonprofit newsroom that covers criminal justice, especially does very good investigative journalism, and with the Invisible Institute, which is based in Chicago, and they do a lot of reporting on police accountability, police misconduct. And inside our newsroom, the main 2 people working on it were me and Michael McEldowney, a photojournalist who still works there and is an incredible journalist too. And there are a few other people too, but so it really was a team effort. And
did it change your life, career? You're like, no one can jack with me now. My hand, as George Costanza said, my hand is stamped. I can come and go as I please.
It did change my life and my career in mostly positive ways. I'll start with the negative ways, and we'll go to the positive. The negative ways is if you meet any journalist, 100% of the time they are just racked with self-doubt, imposter syndrome. It's like an affliction that drives us to this career choice, probably. I'm not sure. And
get criticized for being writers, not doers. Hey, Greg Doyle, if you think you can play quarterback better than I can, why don't you come onto the field? That sort of thing.
Sure. And then also just looking around and seeing how successful other journalists are. And I can't remember who said this, but you can see excellence in reporting very early in your career, but you don't yet know how to execute excellence yet. And so you just keep doing journalism until you reach that point. But the whole time you just feel like you're failing, truly. And I got to tell you, when I got that Pulitzer, I had the imposter syndrome has never been higher. Still, to this day, even it still hits me, and I always bat it down. And it would happen. I would report something, and in my head, I would just have this reader that never actually said this, but for some reason, this voice would be in my head, like, "Oh, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist would write this? They just give those to anyone these days, huh?" And that still hits me. I mean, I would be lying to you if I said it didn't. It kind of added some pressure to myself that I don't think anyone else is adding to me. It's just what's in my own head. But by the same token, it also made my job a lot easier as an investigative journalist. Number one, if people search for an investigative journalist in Indianapolis on Google, they see that, they're more likely to talk to me. People would reach out to me with tips and stuff because of that. And people in our community in Indianapolis, even if they hate every word I write, as you put it, they understand the significance of that award. And even people who root against me, I would say, were calling to congratulate me and thank me. So it made my job a lot easier.
Which was more legitimate, you being awarded the Pulitzer Prize or Barack Obama being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize?
We'll take a line from my friend Robert Vane and just say no comment.
Pays the bills, Ryan. That's what I could tell you. You're listening to the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guest is executive editor of the Indianapolis Star, Ryan Martin. What's your favorite Seinfeld episode?
I think it'd probably have to be the one where George Costanza creates a bed under his desk with an alarm clock, fashions a little shelf.
Anti-calories and male curiosity there, Georgie boy.
He has got to be the best character in TV history.
I'm partial to Barney Fife, but I think that George Costanza is the best character on that show. He drives the whole show with his insecurities and one-liners and such. My kids and I quote them to each other all the time. Is there a particular Hoosier leader and or legend you admire most?
Well, I was mentioning some of them earlier when I was talking about sort of the investigative journalism heritage at the Star. When I've listened to this podcast before, people always have really profound political figures who they reference. You know, I honestly try not to lionize anyone, because what I've learned in my career is that you really never want to meet your heroes.
May I throw a name out there?
Sure.
Because I understand the reluctance to say a particular politician. And for anyone who listens to the podcast, the answer is Mitch Daniels or Jim Morris 99 times out of 100.
Sure.
So I understand that. But what about someone like Ernie Pyle?
Yeah. We have a conference room named after him, too. Proud of that kind of history. But, for me, if you were to make me pick, I would be like a Hall of Famer like Tim Evans. Like, I can't emphasize enough how much of a force for good that man has been for Indiana journalism, but for the state of Indiana as a whole. I don't know what the criteria is to be called a leader or a legend, but if I'm on the podcast, then I think Tim Evans exceeds the criteria.
We could have Tim Evans on the podcast. I'd love to talk to him.
He would be a great guest. You know, I remember being a public safety reporter back in 2017, I think, and just kind of working the grind. And he approached me about partnering with him on an investigative story, because he had seen some of my reporting and had some ideas had been doing some reporting of his own and had some ideas. And he was on the investigative unit. And this is a guy who, for those who don't know, was one of the reporters involved with the massive investigation into the USA Gymnastics scandal, or the Dr. Larry Nassar sex abuse scandal. And so he's on documentaries, and really, he was a really, really well-known investigative journalist. And he grabs me and we start working on a project together, which shifted the trajectory of my career and taught me I can do investigative journalism. He taught me a lot of stuff there, and he just gave that opportunity to someone who otherwise I wouldn't have ever gotten it, probably. And he did that to a lot of people. That wasn't just me. And the kind of impact he had on journalism, and is still having, is profound.
You're the executive editor of the Indy Star. I'm going to guess that means that you write less than you used to. Do you miss it?
Yeah, I write a lot more emails than stories. That's what I've learned. I get paid to write emails. Yeah, I always miss it. In the job prior to this, I was a deputy managing editor at the nonprofit news site Mirror Indy. So I had a brief hiatus in my Star career. And I still, as part of my interview for that process, or for that job, and for the interview for this job, I maintain that every editor should still be reporting some, even if it's on a much smaller scale, because you can lose touch with the community if you're not. So yeah, I'm definitely writing a lot less, but I'm still trying to do all the things I should do as a journalist in this community. So that way I don't just become a professional emailer and that's it.
Does take up a lot of time, that's for sure. Who gets more complaints? Let me say this a different way. About whose writing do you receive more complaints? Greg Doyle or James Briggs?
Well, they both work in jobs where they're really putting their names and faces and ideas out there, and they inspire a lot of reaction, both, positive and negative. And it is never going to be the same. What may inspire positive reaction one day could get negative the next. But I'm a fan of both of their work. I've known them both for years, and I think they do an awful lot of good.
Did you hear that answer, Spangle? It was very diplomatic, so now I know what to say the next time I get a call from Kayla Dwyer. Well, let me answer your question by not answering it. Is it tough?
Hey, you got any job openings for me so I can give the diplomatic answers when a reporter calls?
Yes, we can find you a gig for sure. I was just getting ready to ask you that. You're at the Star. How hard was it to leave the Star and go to Mirror Indy? A lot of Star alumni at Mirror Indy. We should give a shout out to one of the best, and that's Chris Sikich. Chris, I hope you're continuing to heal and doing better. But then you go back to the Star. So which one was more difficult? Did you second guess yourself, or have you said, man, I don't like dicking with budgets. I sure wish I was back at Mirror Indy discussing X, Y, and Z.
So there was one other stop. I was kind of a job hopper there for a minute, and I believe you even made fun of me for it by texting me. I went to work for State Affairs, Indiana, for about a year in the State House, covered a legislative session and wrote some other stories, wrote a lot about utility regulation and energy policy and other sort of topics that are really thrilling like that. I really liked it. My wife thought the topics were boring.
Were you yelling at her, turn the damn light off?
I did go through a phase where I'm like, why is this on 68 degrees? It needs to be 70. So I really enjoyed working for State Affairs. The editor there, Allison, she's incredible. She was really supportive of me in a difficult personal time in my life. That was a period of my life where I was a caregiver for my mother, when she was dying of cancer. And it's extremely difficult. If anyone's been a caregiver, they understand how difficult it is. And one of my strengths as a journalist at this point is empathy. And it's really hard to be empathetic for other people whenever you're going through something like that in your own life. And she was really understanding, coached me a lot through that. So I loved my time at State Affairs. By the end of, a year, though, it was becoming pretty clear that wasn't the right job for me. And that's when Mirror Indy came along. At that point, we didn't have a name or anything. We just we had a pretty good concept, had a plan. I think I was the 5th employee maybe hired, somewhere in there, 5th, 6th, something like that.
You didn't really take off until Amanda Kingsbury went to go work there.
Yeah, another Irvington favorite.
Damn straight.
I have only good things to say about my time at Mirror Indy. What an amazing experience. What a great newsroom. Just fighting the good fight every day. And I'm someone who you will not hear me talk bad about any newsroom, whether I worked there or not in this community. We are in a bit of a golden age of journalism right now in Indiana, in my opinion. And I think more journalism is more. And I try to work with anyone in any newsroom who accepts it.
I don't disagree with you in a certain aspect, and that is there seem to be more people writing about more things in 2025, 2026 than there have been in a long, long time now. I can't speak to the Star in 1970 when it was, or 80s when it was kind of at its peak and how many people they had working there.
Sure.
For someone like me who does public relations and a lot of it's government focused or education, I'm loving Mirror Indy. And you said State Affairs. Obviously, the Capitol Chronicle under Nikki Kelly is doing terrific work. You've got Chalkbeat Axios with a couple of former Star staffers working over there. Actually, maybe 3. Did Lindsay work for the Star? Or did she just work for the IBJ?
IBJ.
Okay.
Star.
So Lindsay Erdity and Justin Mack and Erica Heron. So you've got these Star people everywhere. There's so many more outlets than there used to be. We're not even talking about television. It does seem to be, I would not concede your point, but I would agree with your point. There's a lot going on, while at the same time that the Star's staff has shrunk considerably since even when I was in the mayor's office 15 years ago. You mentioned, I guess we should mention Chris Spangle, and I felt this dagger in the back of my head. The Indianapolis Business Journal has obviously retooled under Nate and Mitch Frazier and Leslie Weidenbender.
Great crew over there.
But it also creates more outlets and more reporters create more competition. How fun is that when you see how the hell did they get this scoop or we didn't? Or how did they get this access and we didn't?
I think I know someone in every newsroom at this point. And so every time I see a scoop that my newsroom didn't get, I have conflicting thoughts of good for them and also, dang it, why didn't we get it? I I think competition is great in journalism, like journalism competition. I think it drives all of us to be better at our jobs. But I don't ever believe in competition to the extent where it gets in the way of public service. You'll notice various stories where our newsroom partners with other newsrooms on a story or an investigation. We have a couple environmental reporters who are doing really great work, whose stories are never behind a paywall because of philanthropic support, and whose stories are made available to other outlets to republish if they want, which some choose to do so. And those are just a couple examples of how I see our newsroom as part of a larger ecosystem. Yes, do I want us to have every story? Do I want us to have every break every story, every scoop, every interview? Of course. But I'm also a realist to know that that's not how the world works. And again, more journalism is more. Let's do it.
Let's go back to your canine story. You wanted to chat about it, so I wanted to give you an opportunity. I didn't want to gloss past it.
Yeah, I have some assumptions based on what you said, but I've been taught not to make assumptions in my line of work. So let's unpack your criticism, your concern.
The police, to me, and I'll speak only in Indianapolis, are the most courageous group of people I've ever met. I was fortunate enough to work at the sheriff's garage when I got out of graduate school in 1998. And your story didn't assert otherwise. So I want to make that point.
Yeah.
No group of people I've ever met and become friends with, whether it's Chris Bailey or whomever, Joe McAtee, list goes on, are in more lose situations than police. Very few people I know have to make more split-second decisions than police officers. And so I feel we should give them as much leeway and benefit of the doubt as possible. And to me, and Vic Reichert and I have had this discussion, Jack Reinhart and I, obviously Russ McQuaid, I feel like the police should be given more respect than they get sometimes, or at least more benefit of the doubt than they get sometimes. And so when I read stories, and look, I was in the mayor's office during OmniSource, during, insert strip club drama here thing, that would just be my foundation is that the cops are good and right a hell of a lot more than they're bad and wrong. And if I had a choice between letting someone go who may or may not have raped someone, or shooting them, or letting my dog chew on them for a while, I'm going to choose letting my dog loose in the hopes that it makes a difference. And that's not, I've exaggerated for effect saying that I hated every word. I didn't. I read every word.
Thank you.
I just believe the police sometimes, the lens through which we view IMPD and other law enforcement agencies sometimes isn't the most fair. You have the floor.
I don't know if there's much in what you said that I would disagree with. So one of the challenges being on the police beat is you carry the baggage, whatever the police point of view is and whatever the varying community points of views are. So every story you write has that baggage, even if you're not intending it to be in there. So I was a police reporter. Maybe I was at the investigative unit by that point, but I was still covering criminal justice in the police department during and after the George Floyd murder. And that's just one example of the kind of baggage that is suddenly a part of your reporting, because you're expected, in this social media era to take a side or have a stand, and my side and stand is always the truth. So that's what I strive to do, is just report the truth. When it came to the police police dogs, they were violating policy. They set I didn't set the policy. Police department set the policy. So I was just reporting. At the heart of it, it was really that. Some of the best sources on that story were themselves law enforcement officers who had problems with what was happening. I mean, after all, law enforcement officers were also being bitten by dogs, and they shouldn't have been getting bit. So it's kind of similar to my reporting on the deaths crisis inside county jails. There are some who read some of that reporting and said, well, if you don't want to be in jail, don't commit a crime. Of course, not knowing that, or not realizing or caring that so many of the people who died were not convicted of anything yet. They were on pretrial. They were pretrial detainees. But by the same token, the results of the challenges inside jails, corrections officers were also victims. They were getting attacked on understaffed units. They were dealing with things they weren't trained or paid to handle. I mean, the list goes on. I always try to keep that type of... I want to make sure that no matter what sort of point of view you come into a story like that with, you can see all the shades of gray, all the nuance. And it doesn't matter if your blood runs red or blue. You can see yourself in the story and hopefully learn something from it.
Let's chat. Oh, by the way, since you mentioned that, I want to say something to the memory of my friend John Durham, who was killed by that murderer in the police van. I knew him for 30 years, 25 years. Really nice guy. Terrific dad. Such a shame. I saved the best for last. Are you ready?
Of course.
Republicans hate the Indianapolis Star. How much does that bother you? I don't know a single Republican who doesn't think the Indianapolis Star and its writers aren't biased. Is that a problem?
Are you referring to elected officials, or are you referring to
every
everyday?
Single Republican I know?
Sorry to laugh, but you just are
You
saying
should
so
laugh.
emphatically.
All I know is because I pitch stories and I work with clients and they just say we don't want to talk to them. Now, some of that is they don't trust the media in general, and the media's had better days, and hopefully we'll have better days ahead. Like maybe my party has had better days, and the Democratic Party has had better days. But I've been straight up told they're a left-wing liberal newspaper. We don't want to talk to them. It's not going to be fair.
I think that is an inaccurate and unfair characterization of the newsroom as it exists right now.
You have a diversity statement on your paper, right, where it's got all the list of all the people who work there. How important is it to you to have ideological diversity, not just on the opinion page, but in the newsroom?
Oh, it's crucial.
Do you think you have it?
Inside the newsroom? I know I have it.
So if I have if I have a client and they say, look, they're going to give me a raw deal. They hate conservatives in the Republican Party and they hate Trump. Why should I talk to them? Now, obviously, one of my jobs is to get them to talk to you, right? That's how I make a living in a lot of cases. What should I tell them? How could I reassure them from a Indy Star newsroom point of view?
That we are not biased? Is that the question?
You're fair. You're not biased. You're not a tool of, nefarious progressive causes up and down the line. Because that's what I get most of the time. And, I go to bat for reporters, obviously, because, again, that's how I make a living. But, I want to give you a platform to say, that's not true. Here's examples. You can always email me since you're on email all day, because I don't think that it's certainly not helpful and healthy for so many people to be so cynical about the news media, not just in politics, but in other things too. Although I get as frustrated as other people do.
I think I'll go back to what I was talking about earlier a little bit, which is if I have a bias, it's toward scrutiny and skepticism of people who have power and influence. And a lot of the concerns I've heard within Republicans are those who have power and influence at the state level because of a supermajority governor's office. I mean, every possible statewide position of power is basically in the hands of Republicans. So, of course, they get the scrutiny from journalists, including inside the Star newsroom. Just as on the opposite side, in the city-county building, it's the Democrats. A lot of the concerns and criticisms I hear about the Star within conservatives, I also hear within people who are liberal, specifically farther left than a lot of others. So, because of
Jesse Brown's not happy you're not fighting fascism as assiduously as he is.
I wondered with all the East Side talk when we were going to get into the counselor names. Let's get into it. So, I mean, I'm not naive. I understand the criticism that you're talking about. So I'm not meaning to be like, oh, I'm surprised a Republican doesn't like the Star. This shocks me. But no, I know the makeup of the people in the room. I know the commitment to fairness. I know the ideological diversity that exists, not only within the reporters, but within the editing ranks, on the opinion pages, even on the sports staff. I can 100% assure you and any listener of this podcast that there is no ideological bent to our reporting, except skepticism and scrutiny of people in power and who have power and influence.
What's next for the Indianapolis Star? I know you're moving out of the mall, moving to the corner. I hope the union had negotiated free parking, given your location that you wrote about downtown. What's next for the Star?
Well, right now, the sports team is extremely busy with all the excitement we have in Indianapolis sports, although we got some bad news yesterday with Colts quarterback.
That's the only bad news that came out yesterday?
It's maybe the only news I feel personally qualified to talk about. I'd be willing to listen to yours, though.
You're not Catholic, Ryan? Notre Dame getting completely and totally screwed over by this nefarious, crooked committee?
Listen, I am a diehard the University of Missouri got all my money so I at least get to be their fan, although they got crushed by KU yesterday, so in basketball.
Mm-hmm.
So that one hurt for me. Absolutely devastated.
It's been KU. The same since Finis Dimbo.
I was wondering when you'd make
That's another 80s reference.
Okay.
What's next for the Star? I mean, what are the big, not going to ask you the big stories, obviously, because you're not going to tell me, of course, but just in terms of the overall business of journalism and so much happening on the state and city level. I've mentioned her name a few times, but I've talked to a few reporters. Kate, who's covering the First Amendment. What a perfect time I don't agree with everything that she's writing, of course, but I do send her notes from time to time when I think something really hits the point. What a terrific time to be a First Amendment reporter. What a terrific time to be a political statehouse reporter. I mean, those sorts of things.
Absolutely.
How does the Star, I'm not going to say stay relevant because that's insulting, but stay at the peak of where it's been of Indiana journalism for decades?
I think it is fair to say, how do we stay relevant? I'm not naive to the fact that we are competing for people's attention every single day. We were talking a little bit earlier about journalism competition. I always see the bigger competition as, Netflix or, video games or whatever else people are wasting their time on. Like, I want them to instead...
You want to take back the verb?
No, I mean it. Like, a lot of what happens in news reporting can challenge people intellectually, can challenge people. It isn't always easy to read the news. It is easy to do other things, to spend your time doing things. And I want more people to be engaged in the news more often than they are right now. And that's not a criticism of anyone else. I mean, guilty myself. I would wager Even you, Robert, could probably be engaged with the news a little bit more, although you're pretty dang engaged. I think about how do we make sure that we are relevant to those people across our community all the time, so when they need something, we're there for them. And that also means we have to challenge ourselves inside the newsroom to reach people where they are. And if you're on social media, you're probably seeing more selfie videos, for example. So a lot of writers are suddenly becoming content creators, like they're influencer style videos or something. That's what the algorithms want. That's what readers want. And so we're doing that.
But the Star had a pretty rigorous, and I enjoyed, especially with Ketzi, working with John Ketzenberger. The Star had a pretty rigorous business section. I don't think you could say that necessarily anymore. I mean, they don't report on it as much as they used to. I think that's a fair statement without being critical. Now you've got Mayor Indy covering a lot of the local news. It's a raison d'etre, it's like we're going to cover things that the bigger guys, the Star, quote unquote, doesn't cover. Chalk Beat obviously has a terrific, it's education centered. So you have these other entities that are eating into your, sort of your audience cookie. How do you compete with the Indianapolis Business Journal when it comes to business reporting?
It is true that there are more newsrooms working in Indianapolis to find stories and serve our community. And I think that that's only a win. That's my earnest answer. I will also note that the Star is reaching more people today than it ever has.
Because of social media and the website, not subscriptions. Is that a fair statement?
Correct. Yeah. And I'm only including website analytics in that. I'm not even talking about all the social media people who I would love everybody who sees a story on social media to click the link and come read on the website too, because that's how we make money. But even if they don't, I just want them to be informed and kind of know what's going on in the news anyway. So that's why we put stuff everywhere. And the numbers, I'm not going to get into them on a podcast that could be used against me in the court of law or whatever. But the numbers are significant. The number of people we're reaching every single day with our journalism, and yet I'm not content. There's one thing. It's one thing to have numbers on a screen that shows that someone got some information or some news from us every single day. When we talk about that relevance, I want us to be a part of people's lives and habits every day, just as some of those other things we were talking about earlier are.
So when you hear someone say, as people say to me, nobody reads the Star anymore.
That is not true.
We've reached the point on the Leaders and Legends podcast where we ask the same 5 questions. You're going to get 6, by the way.
Great.
Of all of our guests. Are you ready, executive editor Ryan Martin?
I sure am.
What was your first job?
Okay, do you want my first W-2 job or first time I made money?
Well, you made money working for your parents, right?
My grandpa. Yeah.
Grandpa, right. Have you ever talked to Mike McQuillan about this?
I don't think so.
You need to talk to Michael McQuillan. He has got the most phenomenal collection of political memorabilia. Used to be on City County Council. I think now he works for DNR. But a friend of mine's father just died, and he had a terrific collection. And she was like, I don't know what to do with all this stuff. I'm like, this is the guy you need to call. I'll connect you to, only because I think you'd find it fascinating with what he has. It's really off the charts.
Absolutely.
First W-2 job.
Okay, first W-2 job. I worked as a 15-year-old in a movie theater in Marion, Illinois. I just saw the news that the movie theater was closing a few weeks ago, which sad memories. That job was so fun. I got paid nothing basically, but I did get to eat a lot of popcorn and I built the movies, the reels.
Oh, really?
Yeah, before digital, I'd splice them together and then I'd have to test them on the Thursday night before the big release. So that was a lot of fun.
What was your first concert?
First concert, I think for some reason I have in my head, I was taken to Stephen Curtis Chapman, Christian artist, when I was younger. But the first concert I chose to go to was, there's this music festival in Macomb, Illinois called Cornerstone, a big Christian rock music festival, which my buddies and I would go to every summer, and you'd camp out. It was like Woodstock, but not quite Woodstock.
I was getting ready to say, there's your next investigative reporting.
And that was a blast. Big fan of, if anyone is a fan of ska, Five Iron Frenzy. That'd be my first one I chose to go to.
If you could suggest any book for someone to read, which book would you recommend?
Okay, so I have a complicated answer for this, and I have a follow-up for you so I can... Are you talking about like a leadership book, or can it be any book?
It can be Richie Rich.
All right, so I'm batting 1,000% on this author when I recommend her. Fiction. It's like crime fiction, but literary. And her name is Tana French. She has a few different books out there. You can basically pick up any of them and start. You said you bleed blue. You would love them.
Good.
She is a phenomenal writer, and her stories are addicting. So when you're not reading The Star, you can read her.
What's your nonfiction book? Aren't you just now getting into your 2022 read pile?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually finished that book. You're referring to Tomorrow, Tomorrow, and Tomorrow. I referenced that the other day. Also a great book. You know, I'll mention Somebody's Daughter by Ashley C. Ford, local, now works at Mirror Indie. Great author, great journalist, and that her memoir is really powerful of growing up in Indiana, dealing with some challenging situations. She writes with a lot of love amid pain, which is really nice, and I would highly recommend it.
If you could witness any event in history, be there in person as it happens, which event would you choose?
I'm probably supposed to pick some sort of like epic moment, like landing on the moon or something. But I would love to be inside of any newsroom during those moments right before they hit publish on some of those historic major investigations, like Pentagon Papers or any of the stories associated with Watergate or Boston
Bill Murray
Globe.
said they framed Nixon. Said that on Joe Rogan. Would you like to comment?
I saw that because he's talking about the Belushi biography, right?
Oh my God, they framed Nixon.
Yeah, well, all the more reason to be there to see if that was true or not.
It's true. Last question. Well, next penultimate question, since that's the word of the season. If you could have dinner with anyone living today, 2 hours off the record, just to chat, whom would you choose? Living today, off the record.
Here's where I get on my soapbox. You ready? I wouldn't do it. I don't want to be off the record with anybody.
We've been off the record.
I've learned since then.
Nobody?
And even if we were ever off the record, I, of course, couldn't confirm or deny it because of the rules of off the record, and therefore it is useless to me as a journalist.
Just the off the record part is just so they could talk about anything they want and not worry about it. It's obviously different for you because you're a journalist as opposed to other people I've asked this question. You wouldn't do 2 hours off the record with Barack Obama or George W. Bush or Michael Jordan?
Probably do Michael Jordan since I don't really report on sports. I would pick Stephen King or an author like that just so I could really understand where they get their ideas. Because
he needs to hire you to do his X account.
Oh, I don't know about that. I just read his books. Is he politically challenging as well for you?
Yes.
Okay.
His information is challenging. He does a lot of apologizing for, I shouldn't have tweeted that, or I got the wrong information. But just in terms of literary genius, obviously I concede your point. I mean, it would be interesting to know how the hell did you come up with Carrie?
Yeah. Or The Shining.
Mm-hmm.
Best book. That's actually what I should have picked. Let's get that in post. The Shining's my favorite book. In all seriousness, for people who are listening, I'm guessing a lot of people understand what off the record is versus not. In general, when someone approaches me to ask to be off the record, I am opposed to it because it tends to be only problematic when it comes to journalism, not helpful. I'm willing to discuss, talking on background and stuff like that, of course. So if anyone's listening and just thinks they're not allowed to talk to me, not because I said that, you can still contact me and we can have a good discussion. It's okay.
You have 2 hours on the record. This is my last question. An opportunity, 2 hours on the record with Donald Trump. Do you take it?
Oh, absolutely.
What do you ask him?
I think I'd have a lot. He's two-time president. What do you think I should ask him?
What do I think you should ask him? The genesis of his malevolence towards the news media. I don't think he's completely wrong in a lot of what he says, but I do believe sometimes there's a better way to handle it. That's why I like reading. You've read the book Presidents in the Press? Harold Holzer?
I haven't read it.
You should read that. It choreographs the dance between the two of them really well, between the media and subsequent president, or a range of presidents.
There was this interesting moment in my career. I can't remember what year it was when the president, when he came to town to make a announcement on his tax plan, 2017, 2018, somewhere in there. He came to Indianapolis for it, and I wasn't covering it. I was like the extra reporter in case something went wrong, basically. So I was there, and not a political reporter.
Sure.
It's not been what I do. But he waves his hand toward the press and calls us the enemy of the people. And I remember thinking, oh, he's talking about me too. I'm the enemy of the people. And like people in the room booed. And I'm like, I know some of these people. Why are you booing me? And, I realized a lot of that is for politics, for theatrics. And there's a time in my life where I would take things like that personally. It just doesn't bother me anymore. And many people in my family who I'm really close to are very involved in partisan politics, like in volunteering on campaigns and donations and everything else. It's like always been a part of my family's background. And so sometimes some of them will see that kind of stuff and contact me and be like, listen, he doesn't really mean you're the enemy of the people, Ryan. He likes journalists like you. So maybe in my 2 hours, I'd ask him, I do the fact checking like we were talking about earlier. Am I the enemy of the people or do you like me, President?
You have been listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise. We are also a federally certified, veteran-owned small business. As always, all our podcast interviews are dedicated to the legacy and generosity of the greatest, and that's P.E. McAllister. Only time I've ever shed tears in an interview was when the Star called to ask me about him when he passed. Our guest today, Ryan Martin. Yes, he is the man with the most email addresses I've ever met in my entire life, but he is also the executive editor of the Indy Star. I've always enjoyed working with you and hope it continues. If there's anything I can do, and I speak for PR people throughout this market, please don't hesitate to reach out. Very kind of you to give me an hour and a half of your time.
Thanks for having me on. I've always appreciated You've been a straight shooter with me. You're one of the few people who, when I call, I think I get you on the first ring most of the time. And I appreciate you having me on. I like the podcast. Thanks for having me.
Come back on, and I'm happy to talk to any Star reporters anytime. Highlight what you're doing. Includes the IBJ and other journalists as well. I really enjoy it. We need a vigorous Indianapolis Star, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for listening to Leaders and Legends, brought to you by Veteran Strategies Incorporated. If you want to contact us about this program or our menu of public relations services, please send us an email at robert@veteranstrategies.com. That's robert@veteranstrategies.com.